The Bible has long stretches where, well, nothing dramatic happens. Lists of names, rules about food, instructions on how to build a tent. And then suddenly, like a character who wandered in from another universe, a man appears. A man with no past, no family, no origin story. His name is Melchizedek. He meets Abraham, offers him bread and wine, blesses him, receives a tithe, and then disappears forever, all in 3 verses. Yet those 3 verses have fueled 2,000 years of debate, speculation, and wild theories. Some say he was just a local king. Some say he was Shem, Noah's son. Some say he was Christ before the incarnation. Others say he was a heavenly being who never died. When one man can be all these things at once, you know you've stumbled onto something strange. This is the story of the most mysterious man in the entire Bible. Genesis 14, the moment it all begins. If you read Genesis like a normal story, chapter 14 makes perfect sense until suddenly it doesn't. Abraham's nephew, Lot, is living in Sodom. A coalition of kings invades, fights a war, and Lot is captured. Abraham gathers 318 trained men and pursues the enemy all the way north. Against impossible odds, he wins, rescues Lot, and brings everything home. A heroic story. Family, loyalty, courage. Exactly what you expect from Genesis. But then, right as Abraham is returning victorious, another king steps into the frame, Melchizedek, king of Salem and priest of God Most High. He appears with no introduction, no explanation, no connection to Abraham's world. He's just there, like a host greeting a king. He brings bread and wine, the ancient symbols of peace and hospitality. To Christians later on, these look like the first hint of communion, but even historically, the gesture is loaded with meaning. Bread sustains, wine brings joy. Together, they signal peace, fellowship, and honor. Then he blesses Abraham, and Abraham, the father of Israel, gives him a tithe, the first tithe ever mentioned in Scripture, and then Melchizedek vanishes. 3 verses, no parents, no descendants, no story before, no story after. A ghost in the text. Why is he so strange? The first red flag, he is both king and priest. In Israel, those roles never mix. Kings come from one tribe, priests from another. But Melchizedek? He's both, and he's doing it centuries before the priesthood even exists. Then there's his city. Salem, later understood as Jerusalem, centuries before it was Israel's capital. And Salem sounds like shalom, peace. A king of peace, offering bread and wine, blessing God's chosen man, and then disappearing? It feels symbolic, almost too symbolic. But when you dig into ancient Canaan, it becomes even stranger. There was a Canaanite god named Shalem tied to dusk and the setting sun. Some scholars think Melchizedek may have been a priest king of a pre-Israelite holy city. So why does Abraham treat him like a legitimate priest of the true God? Because Genesis presents him that way. This raises a provocative question. Was God working through people outside Abraham's bloodline? And if so, who exactly was Melchizedek? The order of Melchizedek, an older priesthood. Melchizedek reappears only once in the Old Testament, Psalm 110. You are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. A mysterious verse. A priesthood older than Levi. A priesthood that lasts forever. Not bound by genealogy. Not limited to time. This became the seed of countless interpretations. Some said Melchizedek's priesthood was eternal. Others said it symbolized a cosmic order predating Israel itself. And then the discoveries began. Melchizedek in the Dead Sea Scrolls, a heavenly being in the Dead Sea Scrolls. A text known as 1:1Q Melchizedek turns Melchizedek into a cosmic figure, almost angelic. In this version, he appears at the end of days to bring judgment, destroy evil, proclaim liberty, and redeem God's people. He's no longer just a historical king. He becomes a deliverer, a heavenly agent of justice. A massive leap from Genesis, but one that shows how his mystery captured the ancient imagination. Jewish tradition was Shem. Rabbinic writings took a different route. Many rabbis believed Melchizedek was Shem, son of Noah, still alive in Abraham's day. This solved the problem of how he knew the true God. It explained his priesthood, and it kept the story within the patriarchal line. Other rabbis argued he lost his priesthood for blessing Abraham before blessing God. In other words, they wrestled with the same question we do. Why does he show up so suddenly? And why does he vanish? Christianity, Melchizedek becomes a cornerstone. For Christians, everything changes with the book of Hebrews. Hebrews points out the obvious. Melchizedek has no father, no mother, no genealogy, no beginning, no end. In Scripture, that silence is interpreted as symbolic eternity. Hebrews uses Melchizedek to explain Jesus. Jesus isn't a priest because of his tribe, he's from Judah, not Levi. He's a priest because he belongs to the older, eternal order of Melchizedek. This answers a major theological problem. How can Jesus be a priest if he's not a Levite? Answer: because his priesthood is older and higher. Catholics see Melchizedek's bread and wine as a foreshadowing of the Eucharist. Orthodox traditions see him as a mystical figure pointing to the eternal priesthood of Christ. Protestants use him to emphasize that no human priest can replace Jesus. A man with 3 verses ends up shaping 2,000 years of Christianity. Why Melchizedek still fascinates us? Because he is an intentional mystery. He appears out of nowhere. He blesses the chosen man of God. He receives a tithe. He holds a dual office no one else has. He vanishes. And then Scripture says the Messiah will follow his priesthood, not Levi's. His silence is what gives him power. He is a crack in the text, a doorway into something older, deeper, and stranger than the familiar biblical world.